A city can starve in silence, and the world can call it complicated. In Sudan, famine is not weather. It is a tactic, a siege drawn like a noose, a 40-mile ring of earth around a city. Food vanishes, people eat animal feed, and then the cameras finally arrive, after the killing is already filmed by the killers. This war is older than the headlines. 2.5 years, 12 million displaced, hospitals targeted, aid blocked on purpose, and outside powers keep the engines running: gold, oil, drones, and deniable supply lines. If you want clear, fact-based analysis like this, subscribe, because Sudan is not far away. It is a preview of what modern collapse looks like. Now let's name the real question. How did the world's worst humanitarian crisis become so easy to ignore? And who benefits from that silence? What is happening in Sudan is not chaos. It is structure. Two forces dominate the headlines: the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces. But that framing hides more than it reveals. This war is not one battle. It is a layered system of violence. 17 militias fight alongside the army. 7 align with the RSF. Others fight for themselves. Old grievances resurface. Local rivalries harden. Civilians are not just victims. Some are coerced. Some are recruited. Some are trapped between parallel governments, issuing decrees from Port Sudan and Niala. And above them all sits a war economy: gold, oil, smuggling routes, foreign patrons who supply weapons without fingerprints. Humanitarian collapse is not collateral damage here. It is leverage. Siege replaces negotiation. Starvation replaces ceasefires. To understand why Sudan keeps burning, we have to go backward to how the system was built long before the first drone strike. This war did not begin with gunfire. It began with a cycle. Sudan has lived through this pattern before. Power concentrated at the center. Peripheral regions exploited, armed, then abandoned. When the center weakens, those weapons turn inward. For decades, militias were not accidents. They were tools, outsourced violence used to crush rebellions in Darfur, Kordofan, Blue Nile. The state paid them with immunity, with land, with access to trade routes and resources. Gold became currency before the war. Oil followed. When the state fractured, those networks stayed intact, and when politics failed, force filled the vacuum. The 2019 revolution tried to break this cycle. It removed a dictator, but it never dismantled the machinery beneath him. The army stayed armed. The militias stayed rich. The system stayed ready for collapse. So when negotiations stalled and trust evaporated, war did not erupt. It resumed. What followed was not random violence, but the first explosion of a system designed to eat itself. And then came the first shock. In April 2024, the siege began. A city surrounded by a wall of earth, El-Fasher, Darfur's last stronghold, cut off from supplies. The RSF, determined to finish what they started, pressed in, tightening their grip on both the city and the people trapped inside. The civilians were the first to starve. Thousands of families, without food or medicine, reduced to foraging for animal feed. Children, desperate, went hungry. Yet the walls grew higher. Inside, those caught in the siege began to speak. Some reached out using Starlink, offering a glimpse of the unimaginable. Famine used as a weapon, human suffering as a strategy. When the RSF finally broke the siege, the city fell. But it wasn't just a military victory. It was a signal, a warning from the RSF to the world. Nothing is beyond our reach. The international community looked on as reports of massacres, torture, and executions filled the airwaves. And for the first time in 2 years, the world began to care. But it was too late for El-Fasher. The truth is hard to swallow. The RSF's victory in El-Fasher wasn't a fluke. It was a consequence. The war that started with violence against civilians has only escalated through the years. But there's something deeper beneath the surface. A system of governance by chaos. A state built on extraction of gold, oil, human lives. In Sudan, war is a machine. And like any machine, it requires fuel. The RSF, by seizing control of Darfur, has established its own supply chain. Gold from the mines, oil from the wells, gum arabic from the trees, all feeding the war economy, all feeding the violence. But the system is built on foreign support. The UAE, Egypt, Russia, they don't just observe. They supply, they arm, they profit. And the government's blind spot, their investment in keeping the chaos alive, because it serves their interests. The cycle repeats. The country fractures while the world looks on, only to wonder when the pieces will collapse. The RSF's rise didn't stop at the cities. It spread like wildfire across the countryside. In Kordofan, the RSF made sweeping advances. Towns fell, one after another, until even the largest oil facility in Sudan, Heglig, was captured. For the RSF, this wasn't about territory alone. It was about power, the kind that doesn't rely on loyalty, but on domination through control of resources. Gold, oil, weapons. Meanwhile, Sudanese civilians in these regions, trapped in between two warring factions, began to see the true scale of the war machine. Airstrikes, drones, artillery, modern warfare clashing with ancient tactics of brutality. The world watched in shock as international diplomacy failed to halt the violence. The war wasn't just in Sudan anymore. It was a regional crisis. With every new victory, the RSF expanded its reach, consolidating control over more of Sudan's vital resources. But there's one thing that can't be ignored: the ongoing humanitarian toll. Hundreds of thousands of people face starvation, disease, and death with no end in sight. And still, the question lingers: what's it going to take to stop this war? What price is the world willing to pay for stability? As Sudan's humanitarian crisis escalates, the impact on its people is felt in every corner of the world. The children who flee with nothing, the families torn apart, the elderly who die from malnutrition and neglect. But it's more than just numbers on a page. It's a deeply human tragedy. Every day, more civilians are caught in the crossfire. Families are displaced, forced to leave their homes, their livelihoods reduced to rubble. And still, the world moves on, blinking at the devastation in a distant land, too distracted to act decisively. Yet, in the midst of suffering, there is resilience. Sudanese citizens continue to risk their lives, organizing aid, supporting one another, despite the brutality surrounding them. Their bravery is unparalleled, but it's not enough. Not without the world's commitment to end the war. The international community, which has failed to protect Sudan's people, now faces the hardest question of all. How many lives must be lost before they act decisively? How many more El-Fashers? How many more sieges before the world takes responsibility? This war isn't just Sudan's problem. It's a global crisis that demands our attention. The implications of Sudan's collapse stretch far beyond its borders. This isn't just a fight for control within Sudan. It's a battle for the stability of an entire region. As the conflict intensifies, neighboring countries are being pulled into the vortex. South Sudan, Egypt, Ethiopia, Eritrea, all these countries are feeling the ripple effects. The power vacuum in Sudan is creating new fault lines. A struggle for resources, for control of the Nile, and for influence over the Red Sea. In the Horn of Africa, the stakes couldn't be higher. Egypt sees Sudan as a critical red line. Its security and its access to the Nile are intertwined with Sudan's fate. Ethiopia, already grappling with its own internal conflicts, fears that Sudan's instability will spill over, dragging in armed groups from the Tigray region and beyond. Eritrea, once a close ally of Sudan's government, now finds itself in a precarious position, balancing support for various factions while protecting its own borders. The geopolitical power struggle is clear, but it's not just about state actors. It's about external forces, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Turkey, Russia, all of whom are backing different sides, advancing their own interests at the expense of Sudan's people. This isn't just a conflict, it's a regional crisis, fueling further instability in an already volatile area. The future of Sudan isn't just a matter of who wins or loses the war. It's about what comes next. In the best-case scenario, the war ends with a negotiated settlement, a ceasefire, a new government formed by Sudanese people, united by a common desire for peace and stability. The world's intervention, humanitarian aid flows in, the war economy is dismantled, and Sudan slowly begins the long road to recovery. In the middle scenario, a fragile peace is brokered, but old divisions remain. The country is fractured, with militias continuing to hold power in key regions. Foreign powers may withdraw, but the legacy of war is entrenched. Civilians continue to suffer, and Sudan's future remains uncertain. In the worst-case scenario, the war escalates beyond Sudan's borders. Neighboring countries are drawn into the conflict, triggering wider regional instability. The war economy continues to thrive, and Sudan becomes a permanent battleground. Famine, disease, and displacement become the new normal. The international community is slow to act, and the world's attention fades as the crisis deepens. The future of Sudan is a choice between peace, fragile stability, or further collapse. But one thing is certain, the world can no longer afford to stand by and watch. The clock is ticking. Every day, the war drags on, leaving devastation in its wake. But the worst isn't over yet. Sudan's people are waiting, hoping for a future that seems increasingly out of reach. The international community has failed to act decisively. Donor countries offer empty promises, and diplomatic efforts fizzle out. The United Nations, the African Union, these institutions have proven impotent in the face of this crisis. Humanitarian aid is stalled, and every day that passes, more lives are lost. The truth is harsh. The world doesn't care enough. We've seen it in the eyes of Sudanese civilians, their resilience overshadowed by the indifference of the international community. Their pleas for help fall on deaf ears. But there's still time for the world to take action. Time for leaders to recognize that this crisis isn't just Sudan's problem. It's a global issue. A failure to act now will echo for generations as Sudan's collapse ripples outward, destabilizing a whole region and eventually the world. The question isn't whether the crisis will spread, it already is. The question is, how will the world respond? Will we continue to turn away, or will we choose to act before it's too late? The fate of Sudan and the future of a generation hangs in the balance. It's time for action.